Alright, guys, here we are. I got done watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 today, and I'm just gonna skip the intro because I want to get into this movie. Um, I'm just gonna tell you now, there's gonna be a lot of spoilers in this movie because I have so many things to talk about that it would be impossible not to talk about spoilers. So, that's just your warning there. If you don't want to be spoiled, then go ahead and skip this one. But yeah, here we go. So, first off, like the first two films, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is directed by James Gunn and written by James Gunn. And to be honest, this film has been on a rocky road to get to the big screen. Even though Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was a huge hit, Volume 3 took a while to get off the ground because of different things. Like, for one, James Gunn was let go by Marvel for a little bit, and then like a year later he was brought back. And between that time frame, there was like a whole thing where we didn't know whether a third movie would happen at all, and if it did, would it be like how the first two are, or would it be like something completely different? And so when James Gunn was brought back to finish his trilogy, he was given a chance to do the screenplay that he had already written for Volume 3, and supposedly that's what we have here. So, and man, oh man, was it worth the wait? Oh heck yeah. This is by far the most emotional of the three Guardians movies. Guardians 1 was emotional, like it. James Gunn's really good at mixing humor and heart. In a lot of ways, he's able to take these characters and make them so humorous and comedic. Yet he's also able to make them very tragic and heartbreaking, especially which we really see in this film, but in the first two films especially, where we see the Guardians come together because in a way they're all broken souls that kind of find a family within each other. And then in Guardians Volume 2, that is expanded upon by when Peter Quill, who's played by Chris Pratt, meets his long lost father, Ego the Living Planet. And then he's forced to kill Ego, and he kind of has to live through that trauma where he watched his mom die. He was forced to kill his own father, and his adopted father died, saving him. So it just kind of built up like this huge tragic life that Peter had. And then when we pick up in Volume 3, we just see Peter, it's just a straight up alcoholic. Like, he's so depressed from losing Gamora, and then when she comes back, she's basically another character. Like, if you've seen Endgame, you know that Gamora died in Infinity War, then in Endgame, a past version of Gamora came to the main MCU, and now she's the leader of the Ravagers, which was originally held by Yondu, but now past Gamora is the leader of that now, and she literally has no recollection of who the Guardians are or anything, because this is a version of Gamora who never went through any of that. This is still the warrior Gamora that we saw from the beginning of the first Guardians movie, before her whole like character development and love for Peter Quill and the rest of the Guardians. So we just see all that, and everything that Peter has gone through, it just finally catches up with him, and he's just miserable. We see like one of the first scenes, we see all the Guardians, and especially Nebula. Nebula, they're all like helping him out because he's just wasted, and Drax mentions again, and it just hints that he's been like this for a while. So man, it was just so sad to see him like that. But undeniably, this movie belongs to Rocket. This is Rocket's movie. We finally get a good, in-depth character study of Rocket. We understand who he is, where he came from, and why he is who he is. So Rocket, when he was a baby, he was experimented on by the villain of the movie, the High Evolutionary. The High Evolutionary, he's like this scientist who he's hell-bent on creating the perfect society and populating it with like perfect specimen and perfect individuals. And he's just so obsessed with that he just brings all these test subjects in and completely ruins their lives. Like, pretty much rips them apart. Like, we just see Rocket as a child in the beginning, where he's literally just shredded. Like, his whole head was, like, cut open and then stitched back together, and you can see in his little baby voice where he says it hurts. It's just so emotional. You see Rocket like that, and it sets up who the High Evolutionary is, because he's probably my favorite MCU villain in a while. The High Evolutionary is. Believe it or not, I know I liked Ant-Man Quantumania, but I think I prefer the High Evolutionary over Kang as a villain. Because this movie, while Ant-Man 3 did establish Kang as a pretty good threat, this film goes above and beyond in establishing that the High Evolutionary is just a monster. Like, there's nothing redeemable. There's literally nothing good about him. He's just a horrible person who takes delight in torturing these innocent creatures just for his mission of what he deems as perfect. Even though we later learn that his definition of perfect isn't perfect. We just see, because he creates, like, an alternate version of Earth called Counter Earth, where it's literally just Earth, but, like, alien creatures. Well, sure, they look perfect, and they seem perfect. We see that their society is probably just as bad as our society. Like, we see one person getting beat up in an alleyway, and another, this like, alien dude is selling, like, drugs to these little, like, teenagers in an alleyway on Counter Earth. And we can see, well, it's not really far off. So what definition of perfect is the High Evolutionary aiming for? So I thought that was really interesting, and not only is he my favorite MCU villain in a while, probably since Thanos and the Green Goblin from No Way Home. I know Green Goblin probably wasn't that far off, but I just really loved the High Evolutionary, and he's probably the best villain of the Guardians trilogy. Ronan, I know he was some people kind of found him stale, and I agree. He could have been interesting, but he was a little underdeveloped. Ego, I liked him. I liked what James Gunn was doing with Ego, where we knew he was going to be the villain, but he did it to where we didn't want him to be the villain. He set up this whole emotional arc between Ego and Peter that when he finally revealed his true colors, it hurt all the way more. And I thought that was a pretty creative way to do it. But the High Evolutionary goes straight through. He's just evil. He's a horrible monster, and he's just irredeemable. Let's see. What else can I say good about this movie? I can't say anything negative about this film. It's perfect. I'm sorry. I know that's kind of cringy to say, especially nowadays when it comes to comic book movies, but this movie's perfect. There is nothing bad about this film at all. The visual effects are stunning. I know a lot of people kind of had a few qualms with Quantumania, and I personally thought it was alright, but Guardians 3 is, oh man, all the CGI was perfect. The visuals were perfect. Classic James Gunn that we're all used to at this point. The bright colors and the style that he writes in, like I said, with the humor and heart perfectly mixed together. It's all there. Rocket's backstory. This film does something that which is usually a hit or miss for me, but it kind of tells like a non-linear story, so where it continuously cuts between the present with the Guardians trying to find a cure for Rocket, and then it cuts to the past multiple times and slowly gives us Rocket's origin story through like fragments of his memory that he's remembering while he's comatose, because in the beginning he is kind of nearly killed by Adam Warlock, who I'll get to in a moment. So I'm usually kind of mixed on when films do non-linear stories, because it can kind of get a little convoluting, especially when you're trying to mix the two plot lines together. But I honestly thought this film did it pretty well. It made sense, so when you could tell that each flashback was specifically, in a way, Rocket is having PTSD, because this is hinted at as well when he, spoiler alert, when he comes back, when Rocket is perfectly fine, he hears the High Evolutionary's voice, and we see him like jump just from the sound of the High Evolutionary's voice. So you can tell that this guy has traumatized him horribly, and it helps reinforce that these memories are having, in a way, they're kind of nightmares and PTSD episodes where he just can't stop reliving those horrible moments that the High Evolutionary put him through. The action in this movie is perfect. My favorite scene is probably, well, I've got two favorite action scenes. My first one, probably near the end, where all the Guardians are together and they're fighting in like this long hallway. They kind of get their Rogue One Darth Vader scene where they're fighting all these like evolutionary goons and in this hallway. My second favorite will probably have to be in near the beginning when Drax and Adam Warlock are fighting, because Drax picks him up. He's like, "Why don't you pick someone on your own size?" And they just get into a huge fight on nowhere. I thought that was cool. I really loved that Drax got a really cool action scene, because, to be honest with you, if there's one thing I would have to criticize about the Guardians films, I kind of feel like Drax became too much of a comic relief. The first Guardians movie established him as like this lone warrior who lost his wife and daughter to Ronan the Accuser and then Thanos, or by extension Thanos, and he's just bent on getting his vengeance. And so I will admit the first two Guardians films kind of went a little too far into the comedic element for Drax, more than I would have liked. Of course, he's still comedic here, but this film, it really kind of pushes Drax a little bit more forward that I was really hoping for. Especially when Drax, how it ends, he stays on Nowhere to help raise the children that they had saved from the High Evolutionary, who he had like kidnapped and was testing on them. Drax is gonna kind of be like the fatherly figure to them all. So I thought that was a nice little ending for Drax's character. So he kind of got to be the father that he was never got to be, as a result of what Ronan and Thanos did. Speaking of, I guess I should talk about Adam Warlock now. Adam Warlock, I've been wanting him in the MCU for a while. He's a cool character. If you know the comics, you know Adam Warlock is, in a way, Thanos' nemesis. Like, they're always intertwined with each other. Adam Warlock and Thanos are always together. They're not, like, as close as, like, Batman and the Joker, but they're definitely close. They're always tied to each other. And so, while I will admit, it is kind of a little bit disappointing that we won't get to see that in the MCU, I still like how they did Adam Warlock in this film. It's still very, very faithful to who he is in the comics. Adam Warlock, he's usually seen as, like, this godlike being, because he was supposed to be, like, the perfect, like, individual or something. And they kind of build him up like that because it's revealed that the High Evolutionary created the Sovereign, those golden people. Adam Warlock is supposed to be, like, the perfect Sovereign. And, well, of course, in a way, he's kind of still an infant, because the High Evolutionary took him out of his birthing pod a little too early. So, in a way, he's kind of an infant. He looks like an adult, but he acts like he has the mentality of an infant, because we see him, like, taking care of this little animal, which I can't think of his name right now, but he kind of starts raising it he treats it like a puppy, and you just see those two and Adam Warlock just, like, holding that creature and just loving on it, and it's just so cool. So yeah, I liked how they did Adam Warlock in this movie. I hope they do more with him. I'm sure they will, because Adam is a pretty big prevalent character in the comics. So I would honestly be surprised if they didn't do anything with him. So the ending of the film, believe it or not, nobody dies in it, and like none of the Guardians die. But they all get separated. So Star-Lord, he goes to Earth and meets his grandfather, the man who we saw in the beginning of the first movie, who was next to him and his mom when she died. He gets to reunite with him. Gamora goes back with the Ravagers. I was a little disappointed at first that Peter and Gamora didn't get together, but I'm actually happy they didn't force it, because we spent like 2 whole movies establishing Peter and Gamora's romance, and now we come back with this new Gamora, who has no recollection of who Peter is, and I was nervous that they were going to try and force some of the same character development in for that, but they really didn't. They just kind of accepted, yeah, Peter loves Gamora. He will always love her. It's just, this is a different Gamora. It's Gamora, but it's still a different person in a way. So this is a new person with her new interests, and they just kind of go their separate ways on that. So in the end, more I thought about it, I really did like how they did that. Rocket is the leader of the Guardians now. The new Guardian group are him, an adult Groot, Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock's like Pet, and Cosmo, and I can't remember if they named her, but it was like a little girl. It was one of the High Evolutionaries hostages that he had that they were able to rescue in the climax of the movie. So I can't remember what her name is. Let me know in the comments if you remember her name. But yeah, she's in the member now. Yeah, it's great. Oh, I should mention, I believe in my holiday special review, I said that I wasn't a huge fan of Groot's CGI. I gotta admit, I loved it way better here. His design is definitely much, much better. I really liked it. He just looks amazing in this movie. So yeah, I take that criticism back with what I said there. I really liked it in this. So with that, dang, I gotta give this a 10 out of 10. I gotta give it a 10 out of 10. I loved this movie so much. Broke my heart. In a good way, but still in a sad way. Dang. The Guardians movies are my favorite MCU solo films, and now they're probably my favorite MCU trilogy. I know a lot of people like the Captain America trilogy, and the Iron Man trilogy, and the Thor trilogy, but I gotta go with the Guardians. I love them. I'll always love the line from the first movie where they're arguing about fighting Ronan, and Rocket says, "Why would you want to save the galaxy?" And Peter Quill's like, "Because I'm one of the idiots that live on it." That would be me, okay? If I were tasked to save the world, that would be my answer. Why would I want to save the planet? Because I'm one of the idiots that live on it. That's why I want to save it, okay? Okay, with that, this has been my review for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The final officially confirmed Guardians film in the MCU until further notice, because there is a tease that maybe Star-Lord will come back. I know Dave Bautista's Drax and Zoe Saldana's Gamora, they confirmed that they're pretty much done with the MCU. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, especially now that James Gunn is moving over to DC. So he said he's not going to do any more with Marvel. Star-Lord, the movie definitely confirms he'll be back, and it's hinted that Groot and Rocket, since they're leading the Guardians, it's hinted that they'll come back. Oh yeah, Kraglin was a new member of the group too. So it's hinted they'll come back. I bet they'll be like the leads if they do a fourth one. But I don't know. I don't know if they'll do like another Guardians of the Galaxy movie. If anything, they'll probably do movies with the Guardians in them. Kind of like how they were in the Avengers movie, but it was still, Infinity War was still an Avengers film just with the Guardians in it. I think it's going to be more like that. We'll see the Guardians again, but they'll be in other films, and it won't necessarily be a Guardians Volume 4, but I could be wrong. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes at Marvel. So with that, this has been my review. Remember, God loves you and I love you too. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I do some pretty sweet movie reviews, and I don't want you guys to miss them. So with that, see you guys next time.